YouTube. We're reviewing more cards, this time the green ones. I'm going to talk about limited.
And I'm going to talk about standard, but if you've watched any of our other videos, you already know that we're talking about green cards today.
Oh yeah, the first card we're going to be talking about is Adventure Awaits. For 1 and a green, you get a sorcery at common that says, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you didn't put a card into your hand this way, draw a card.
2 mana guaranteed draw card. Sometimes get what you want. It's okay. Especially in green. It's pretty good. I don't know that it's like, oh my god, this card. Oh, it is a 2 mana draw a card spell at the end of the day. I think that this is a D tier card. I don't really think it's gonna be able to fit into very many decks, although it is slightly better than some other cards that have a similar effect just because you are guaranteed to draw a card. So
yeah, some parallels there in limited. In every set, green sees a card like this that's just like, hey, by the way, also you can have card selection in green. You don't have to play blue. But it's just not that good. The fact that this one always gets you a card, even if you miss, is pretty good and makes it a little bit better than the rest of them. But I feel like it probably doesn't make the cut. You're just gonna play more dudes to beat the face in a little bit more. It's a D most of the time.
Up next, we've got Ancient Green Warden. For 4 and double green, you get a 5/7 elemental creature at Mythic Rare. It's got reach, and you may play lands from your graveyard. And if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time.
It's a pretty juicy card.
Can you say hello landfall? Can you say hello infinite fabled passages? Can you say what the what? This card has got a very high power level. I mean, a 6 mana for a 5/7 is already playable most of the time, and with reach, that's not a horrible card to play just because it's got a big body. It gets in the way of things. It makes your opponent think twice about attacking, and that's always pretty good. And then you may play lands from your graveyard is also just a really good effect to have. And then you throw in the second one. It's like this card's gonna see play in any deck that has green and cares about landfall at all. It's gonna see play in decks that don't even care about landfall really, just because of everything that it does. I think this is a solid B, maybe even an A tier card. Yeah, I'll give it an A tier. I won't go conservative with this one. I'll say this is a pretty much a bomb whenever you play it, and it's gonna allow you to win games. So.
In limited, a 6 mana 5/7 with reach alone is already pretty good. Like you would say that's probably a C, almost. Yeah, probably. You can play your lands from your graveyard is actually incredibly relevant in this set because of the modal double-faced cards, which we've yet to talk about, but they'll get their time in the light. Your creature is going to die. It's going to go to the graveyard, and then you can play it as a land. I think I'd have to double check. I know cards in the graveyard and stuff only have the text on the front of the card. So I'll have to double check on that. But if you can play the double-faced cards as lands from the graveyard, it's going to be insane. Otherwise, I mean, it's still really, really good, doubling your landfall triggers. It doesn't do anything completely on its own, really, aside from, get lands from your graveyard. So it falls just shy of being a bomb, but you're almost always first picking this anyway. It's a B.
I mean, even if it works with the modal lands, so you play the flip side that's not a land, and then you get to play it as a land, so you get both sides of the card. Even that is still good.
If it can do that, it'll be really, really, really good. But I'm not really 100% sure on that. I'd have to look it up. So I don't know. Someone look it up for me and tell me in the comments.
Pretty pleased with the cherry on top.
Next up, we have Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. For 3 and green, you get a star legendary elemental creature at Mythic Rare. It says Ashaya, Soul of the Wild's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, and non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types.
So, Craig went a little bit Hearthstone there with legendary. Yeah, this card is amazing. I like if you're playing a green deck, why would you not include Ashaya at all? For any reason? I mean, at turn 5, she's a 5/5. If you have any creatures on the board, she's bigger than a 5/5. Um, late game, she's fucking humongous in green. She's a build around card. This is an A tier card. There's not really a whole lot of downsides besides that she doesn't have like trample or vigilance or anything like that. But there are easy ways to give her that. And getting to 5 mana is you can get there pretty quickly in standard right now. So turn 3 playing an Ashaya for a 5/5 is pretty good. Pretty good.
In limited, it's going to be quite good as well. It's just going to get bigger and bigger as the game goes on. It's going to turn your creatures into lands, which will matter sometimes, but not super often. Sometimes it'll let you double spell, but most of the time you're just going to want to attack with those creatures anyway. So, whatever. The only issue keeping her from being a bomb is that she doesn't have any kind of evasion or anything like that. Like if you can get trample on her or make her fly or something, it'll be really insane, obviously. But it's going to keep her out of winning the game alone territory, which does kind of suck. But I mean, you're always playing this card. You're not cutting it, and you're first picking it a lot of the times. It's a B.
I like her.
Yeah, very cool card.
Then we've got Broken Wings. For 2 and a green, you get a common instant that says destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Green always sees these cards all the time. The fact that it gets an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying instead of like splitting that up into 2 different cards makes it okay. I don't really see this being ran a whole lot, unless enchantments or the UW Flyers deck goes crazy. I don't think it will. I think this is fringe playable at the very best. I think it's a D tier card. The only thing that's keeping it from F is the fact that it has 3 modes, I guess.
In limited, you're right. Green does see a lot of cards like this. Usually, it's either target artifact or enchantment, or it's a creature with flying.
Yeah.
Bundling them together in limited makes this significantly better. And this is a set where there's going to be a lot of artifacts. Most of your opponents are going to play a piece of equipment a lot of the time. And there are even some decent artifact creatures that you might want to kill. I think they print these cards with best of 1 in mind in Arena. And I think that's where you're going to play this is in best of 1. But if you're in best of 3, you'd rather just bring this out of the board. So instead of just giving it a flat out F, because of best of 1 and sideboarding, it's a D. But you probably still don't want to main deck it. It's a decent 23rd card. If you're like, man, I really just got a big pile of poo poo here. I just slop this thing on in here. Yeah. I could be wrong. If the artifacts are everywhere, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is something you really want to play, but I don't think so.
Nah, I don't think so either.
Next up, Canopy Baloth. For 3 and a green, you get a 4/3 beast at common with landfall. Canopy Baloth gets +2/+2 until end of turn.
4 mana 4/3 in green with a decent landfall mechanic. I mean, if this thing said trample, it would be playable. It doesn't though. I don't think this card does enough to be put into a landfall deck. I think this is another D tier card. It might see some fringe play, but I really don't like it for standard. I think our opinions are going to differ greatly from between standard and limited.
I think so too, because in limited, this is a fine common. 4 mana 4/4/3 is a decent rate. Landfall to make it a 6/5 is insane. A 6/5 it's not going to die. Turn it sideways and hit your opponent. You're going to feel pretty happy about that. You're probably never cutting this, and this honestly is almost strong enough to be first pick sometimes, but probably not. You're probably going to be taking removal or some other even bigger beast. So a C, but still a really, really strong dude.
All right. Then I've got Cragplate Baloth. For 5 and double green, you get a 6/6 creature beast at rare with kicker 2 and a green. This spell can't be countered. Hexproof haste. If Cragplate Baloth was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 4+1/+1 counters on it.
I like this card because it's almost my name.
Yeah. It's 10 mana 10/10 that can't be countered and has hexproof and haste. What's not to like about this card?
The mana cost.
No, it's a 10 mana 10/10. You know, what do I expect the 10/10 to be? 10 mana. This one also has hexproof and haste. What the what? Because it's kind of weird how stat lines progress the bigger the creature is, right?
Yeah.
Like 13 for a 13/13 isn't really that bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like 2 mana for a 1/1 vanilla is pretty bad. You know what I mean? Like it kind of goes up in a weird way. But this is a 10 mana 10/10 with hexproof and haste that can't be countered. So it's always hitting the field. It can't be spot removed. It has to be dealt with on the ground on its own terms. At the very least, it's a 10 mana board clear. Sometimes you're hitting them in the face with it. So I don't think this card is broken. I think it's a fun card for sure. You know, playing a 7 mana 6/6 that does it is pretty fun. Playing the 10/10 mode is definitely fun. I think this is a B tier card just because, you know, it can be pretty swingy when you play it, and I think it's going to go into a big beast deck of some sort.
Yeah. In limited, you're paying 7 mana for a 6/6, which is not very good. You want, generally speaking, you want a bit of a bigger body for 7 mana, but as long as the text is good, it should be fine. And the text is great. It can't be countered, can't be killed with all the crazy amounts of spot removal black has, and it gets to attack right away. That's awesome. The fact that you can slap this down as a 10/10 later for 10 mana, just if you happen to have 10 mana laying around, is pretty cool. The difference between a 6/6 and a 10/10 is actually pretty relevant. A 6/6 is going to get double blocked a lot of the times and dealt with. You're still 2 for 1ing your opponent, and that feels pretty good. Any creature that can 2 for 1 on the ground for basically free with no help is pretty solid. I don't know if it's like bomb, if it's going to absolutely win you the games, because most of the time it's going to get double blocked and taken down. But it's really close to being there. I'm going to give it a B, but I could be wrong about this one. It could be an A, but I think it's just a B.
I'm not as experienced and limited as you, but I'd say that's a pretty bomby card, but you would know better than me. So
well, next up, Dauntless Survivor. For 1 and a green, you get a 1/1 human warrior at common. When Dauntless Survivor enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature.
Poopy, garbage, F tier.
In limited, it's pretty good. It's a 2 mana 2/2 all on its own, and I'll talk about this once here. It's got a party member tag. It's got a warrior tag that obviously brings it up in value. So keep that in mind for any warriors, wizards, rogues, and clerics. It's going to bring them all up in value. And the black-green deck cares about +1/+1 counters. You're going to play this pretty frequently. I don't see any issues with it. It's a solid C.
You see his flavor text? I've got a little surprise for you. Beasties, come and get it.
I think he's talking to the beasties. Got a little surprise for you, beasties. Come and get it. He's going to spear them.
I don't know. I still think it's cute. I like it. Next we have Gnarlid Colony. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2 common beast creature with kicker 2 and a green. If Gnarlid Colony was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. Wow. Something, you know, it's not bad. 2 mana 2/2. That has that additional effect isn't horrible. A 5 mana 4/4 that has this effect on it's also not horrible. I still don't think it's quite good enough to see any like real constructed play, but it's not horrible. I'll give it just because of the additional effect, I'll give it a C because I think it might fit into some decks that care about +1/+1 counters and trample in standard. So yeah, solid card.
Yeah, in limited, this is a sneakily good common. 2 mana 2/2 is fine. With upside is great. So you can play it in the late game for 2 mana to give all your team surprise trample, and you can also play it in the late game as a 4/4 with trample on its own right. Kicker often brings cards up in value a lot, especially you get this early game creature that's pretty good, and then now all of a sudden in the late game it's also a late game creature. Incredible. This little guy is gonna really surprise you, and this is probably one of the best green commons, if not the best green common. And I think you might even first pick this in weaker packs when you're already green. I think this little guy is gonna be a B.
Huh.
Next up is Inscription of Abundance. This is the green inscription card. For 1 and a green, you get instant at rare with kicker 2 and a green. Choose one. If it was kicked, choose any instead. The selections are: put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. And target creature you control fights target creature you don't control.
Interesting card. 5 cost. I think that this is worth 5 mana, actually. I think some of the time, I don't think any of the modes, just like we've done with the last one, we'll analyze the modes based off of the mana cost for 2. 2 +1/+1 counters for 2 mana. It's not horrible. It's slow. It's really, really slow, but it's worth it in the long run, just because they stick around. Target player gains X life, and where X is the greatest power among the creatures you control. Sometimes I guess you want to play this for just 2, just to, heal up after a red onslaught that you've made it through. And 2 mana for that's not horrible, but you have to have a board presence for it to actually be relevant. So you're not playing it for this one most of the time.
Yeah, worth noting, you have to have a board presence for all.
Yeah, for all of them,
which is why it's the cheapest inscription.
Yes. And target creature fights you control fights target creature you don't control for 2 mana. Yeah, that's playable. That's doable. And playing it for 5 is obviously meant to swing the board in your favor. Especially if it's like dual mode and you just got one. You each have one creature, or a 2-for-1, and you want it to fight something. And yeah, I like this card. I think that it's going to definitely see play. It's just flexible enough to see play in a wider variety of decks than you would originally think. So I mean, I give this a solid B. I think this isn't the most impressive of the inscriptions, but it's definitely not the worst either.
In limited, this card's great. I mean, even if you're casting it just for 2 mana, it's going to help your creature win a fight, or it's going to win a fight that it could already win and push through. And if you manage to kick it at instant speed, you could potentially buff your creature to win combat, and then also use that creature to kill something else. And if you have a hardy enough boy, you could 2-for-1 your opponent with this card and heal while you're doing it. And 5 mana is a reasonable ask for that. At instant speed, this thing could really blow your opponents out. Green needs removal, and this is pretty much, this is pretty decent removal. It usually gets fights. So that's totally fine. You're going to pick this a lot. You're going to first pick it a lot, especially if you're already in green. It's an easy B.
I like the fight mechanic. I remember when it was introduced, it was like, wait a minute, you mean this happens? It was mind blowing.
Yeah, thank God for removing all the text that explained what fighting was and just writing the fucking word fight.
Yeah, because it was just I remember you trying to explain it to me, Craig, and I was just like, I have no idea what this man is talking about, but I think I'm gonna make it work. Anyway, Iridescent Horn Beetle. For 4 and a green, you get a 3/4 insect creature with, at the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each +1/+1 counter you put on creatures under your control this turn. Selesnya says hello. Selesnya says gimme. I think that's literally the only deck that this card fits into, but boy does it fit in there. It is They always want to play this card if they can. 5 mana for a 3/4, not the greatest. The fact that it does create the 1/1 after you play it is an upside and makes this card a little bit better. If it said upkeep instead of end step, it'd be way worse, in my opinion, because it just literally does nothing when it comes out, so it's not really worth the premium cost. But
well, it doesn't do anything when it comes out unless you also put counters down on that same.
It's true, but there's a lot of ways to do that passively. There's a lot of cards.
That's fair. You can just already have something on the board that's dishing out counters.
Yeah. So and on turn 5, you're very likely to be able to do that. With some white cards in Selesnya. So the Selesnya deck is going to get a huge buff, and I think it's going to see a little bit of play. I don't know how good it's going to be, but this guy's going to make the fit in there. I think this is a B tier card, just because of the cost, because sometimes, like Craig stated, sometimes it's just a 5 mana 3/4 that does nothing when it comes out, and that's pretty bad. But the upside can be pretty big, so...
Yeah, in limited, this guy's obviously really good. It's a good +1/+1 counter payoff. If you can untap with this thing and then put some counters down, it'll be really good. It says for each +1/+1 counter you put down, which is pretty unusual. Usually cards like this just make something if you've had any counters enter. So, usually cards like this would just make one thing every turn. But this one, you can reasonably pump out 2, 3, or more insects in one go with this guy. So that's pretty good. If you can get this to make 1 or 2, you're in business already. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's going to be hard. The black-green deck is all about +1/+1 counters. There's tons of kicker cards that put +1/+1 counters down. I think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be really strong. And I think you're going to first pick this in some weaker packs. I think it's a B.
Yeah, I think this card has a lot of support in limited, so I think the +1/+1 counter deck is a real thing. Just from talking to you,
the deck is going to be pretty strong.
Just from going over the cards with you, and
the only deck that I think is going to be better is the blue-black deck, which is going to be insane. But
it's going to be great.
Next up is Jiraga Visionary. For 3 and a green, you get a 3/2 elf wizard at common that says when Jiraga Visionary enters the battlefield, draw a card.
It's too expensive. It's too expensive by 1 mana. If it was 3 mana for a 3/2 that did this, it would probably see a little bit of play. I think it's too slow. I think that you'll just play other visionaries or other things that do this. That's better. I mean, I guess the tagline is relevant. The creature tagline is relevant. But outside of that, I really don't see this card being played very much. So I'm gonna give this a D, just because it draws a card. It's the only thing keeping it from being an F.
In limited, this card's fine. 4 mana 3/2 is not a great rate, but it replaces itself. I think it makes the cut most of the time. Especially if you care about having a party, this is one way to get a wizard in green. So, it's fine. It's not overly impressive, but I think it does make the cut a lot of the time. Although there's a lot of strong 4-drops, so I'm tempted to bring it down to a D, but I don't think so. It draws you a card in green. That's good enough. C.
At least we both value drawing a card the same way. Exactly 1 grade. It's 1 grade better because it draws.
Well, it would have been a pretty high D, like.
But still, Kazandu Nectarpot. Well, that's a fucking name. I'm sorry, but for a 2 mana 1/3 insect creature at common, it has landfall. Whenever your land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Surprisingly, I think a little Nectarpot here is actually going to see some play. I don't think his landfall effect is like the craziest thing in the world. I think it's actually pretty fair. But I think that there might be some weird life-gainy decks because people are really, really sad that Johnny Pridemate is gone. So people might experiment with some weird things, and this might be one of the cards that they do it. The landfall thing, gaining one life a turn. I could see a Golgari veto deck with this in it, that kind of thing. I don't know that they're good. I think this is probably a D+. Because it's not it's not game changing or meta shaping in any way, shape, or form. But I think it'll fit in somewhere.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, in limited, it's also going to do some good work for you. It's going to, go up the ground a little bit as a 2-mana 1/3. It's going to keep you alive better with its landfall abilities, and eventually you're going to get to play your big stuff and beat them in the face. It's not amazing in decks that want to get ahead fast, so you're going to cut it sometimes there. But I think it makes the cut enough of the time for me to give it a C. It's kind of on the same line as Dragon Visionary there, where it's close, but I think it makes the cut enough of the time. Next up, Kazandu Stomper. For 5 and a green, you get a 6/5 beast at common with trample. And when Kazandu Stomper enters the battlefield, return up to 2 lands you control to their owner's hand.
I don't like this card very much. I like that it says the only thing I think that saves this card from being a complete F is it says return up to 2 lands. So
you can always just do 1 or 0.
You can always just do 1 or 0. But 6 mana for a 6/5 a trample is not good enough to be played. It's just not, unfortunately. So I think this is a D tier card. Just because it's another one of those budget situations where people want hands back in their want lands back in their hand. Sorry, and this might help them do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see it making waves either.
I don't like this card very much.
In limited, however, this is a pretty good top end. 6 mana for a 6/5 is okay. Give it trample, and it's much, much better. And when it enters the battlefield, you can pop your lands back to your hand and re-trigger all your crazy landfall abilities. That's really, really good. It's almost first pickable, but I think it's just a little shy of that. But I think you are always welcoming the first copy of this into your landfall decks or any green deck that needs a top end. It's an easy C, close to being a B, but I don't think it quite makes it.
Oh boy, I'm gonna click on it.
It's one of my favorite cards.
And we got Lotus Cobra. For 1 and a green, you get a 2/1 creature snake at rare with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. You know what this card is. This card is insane. It's broken. It's gonna be in some decks. People are going to force green just to be able to play this card sometimes. And I think that'll be fine. I think this is an S tier card.
Oh yeah, in constructed, this card it dominates. Especially play and pop a Fabled Passage. Ugh, gross.
Yeah.
In limited, this card's pretty good too, although it's not as busted as it is in constructed. A 2 mana 2/1 is not the best stats, but not horrible either. At least it's got 2 power, and the landfall ability is gonna be relevant pretty frequently, giving you 4 mana on turn 3 and 5 on 4, etc., etc. You're going to be able to make use of that a lot more often than you think, and you're going to be taking this early as frequently as you can. It's an easy B.
I'm gonna make a silly deck with Azusa, the guy that gets you can play lands from your graveyard, and this Lotus Cobra here. Make a silly ramp deck.
Just make all the
mana.
That
gets you just all the mana in the world.
I have nothing to do with it, but I have.
No. Then I'm gonna.
don't do anything with it.
Then I'm gonna get the Leyline Tyrant and make all the mana red, and then just always have just so much green, so much red mana floating, and then just kill someone. It's gonna be great.
I love it.
It's a 4 card. It's not gonna work, but it's gonna be great.
Next up is Might of Marasa. For 1 and a green, you get an instant at common with Kicker for 2 and a green. It says target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If the spell is kicked, that creature gets +5/+5 until end of turn instead.
This card's not good enough. Green already has access to cards that for 2 mana that do it better. Playing this for 5 is kind of silly. I don't know that you'll play it for 5 ever. I mean, maybe in some situations where it's just sitting in your hand, but you don't want to play it for 5. You want to you don't want to play this card. Actually, it's just an F tier in my opinion. I don't think that green in standard needs this. I think it's got things that do it better. So
in limited, this card's fine. 2 mana for +3/+3 is going to make your creature win combat a lot. And 5 mana for +5/+5 is no joke, especially if you can put it on a trampler and really just start running your opponent over. Sometimes this is going to let you sneak in that lethal damage that you're really just trying to push through those last few points. And I think that's where it's really going to shine. I think you welcome the first copy of this if you are, especially if you're lacking removal. Green tends to need these sort of combat tricks in order to make it done. Make it happen, or get it done. I need to pick a phrase, but
make
don't
it
say
done.
both.
No,
That's
make
stupid.
it done, dude. No,
make it done. You gotta
embrace
make it
done. Embrace the make it done.
All right, I'll put it on a t-shirt.
Do it.
Yeah, but it's reasonable. Although I think you cut it if you've got enough removal, but sometimes you won't. I'm giving it overall D, but sometimes you need it.
A D that you need. Gonna leave that there and keep on moving on. Next, we have the best card in the whole set. I've got a Marasa Brute for 2 and a green. You get a 3/3 Troll Warrior. At common, you're right. At common.
That matters to me.
His card also reads, some adventuring parties are made up of old friends. Their common bonds bolstering them in the face of peril. Other parties simply hire the biggest, meanest muscle they can find. You know,
it's great card
that's
text.
True. It's great card text. I think that this is an S+ tier card in standard. If you're playing a Troll Warrior deck, you play this card. It's making it in every time.
Oh my god. Get out of here. In limited, this is fine. It's a 3 mana 3/3 that fills your warrior slot. 3 mana 3/3 is a good rate. It's actually, it's not that bad. A lot of times you get a 3/2 or a 2/3 or whatever. It's fine. You're still gonna cut it if you can for something with some actual text.
You don't cut this card.
It's
Greg.
a D.
You don't cut this card ever. No, it's an F tier card.
I think everyone knew you were joking.
But I'm just saying it's not double green, and that is something that should be said.
That's true. It's not double green. All right. Marasa Sproutling for 2 and a green. You get a 3/3 plant elemental at uncommon with kicker for 1 and a green. And it says when Marasa Sproutling enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target card with kicker ability from your graveyard to your hand.
This card is literally the last card, but better in every way. Anyway. So this is a B tier card. You're gonna play this card. You're not gonna play this card for 3 mana ever, I don't think. I think that is, unless you are about to lose the game, unless you have a blocker, that's probably the only time you're gonna play Sproutling out like that. You're gonna play it for 5 mana every time. You're gonna get one of your stupid kicker cards from the graveyard and replay it, and it's going to win you the game sometimes. So this is a support card, so that's why it's only B tier. I like it though. I think it's definitely necessary with all the other cards that they've printed, and it's pretty reasonable.
In limited, this card's great. It's a 3 mana 3/3 that in the late game draws you a card as well for just a measly 2 mana more. It draws you your choice of a card as well. So it's really solid. You're probably not going to pick this like too crazy high. It's just a 3 mana 3/3 and a 5 mana 3/3 that draws a card. It's not like insane, but it's really good. You're not cutting it to see.
Next, we have Nissa's Zendikar. I like the name of this card. Just Zendikar is cool. For 3 and a green, you get a common enchantment aura with Enchant Land. Enchant Land is a 4/4 elemental creature with reach and haste. It's still a land. When enchanted land dies, return that card to its owner's hand. I think this card's pretty good. I mean, it's gonna see play for sure. The fact that the land goes back to your hand after it dies is pretty awesome. So it enables landfall trigger abilities. It's not a huge risk to play this on a high value land. like some other enchant land spells might be, or especially any animated land spells might be, because you just sometimes lose those lands in those cases. But this one you don't. I think it's gonna make it the slot in some decks that just want to run more dudes. So yeah, I think I'll give this a C tier for sure.
In limited, this is gonna be fine. It's gonna be a 4-mana 4/4 with reach. A lot of the times, it's gonna come into play tapped though, because if you're playing this on turn 4, it's not gonna happen. However, if you do happen to have 5 lands laying around, you can make a 4-mana 4/4 with reach and haste. You can attack with it. You can leave it back to block. And when it dies, you just get to replay your land again to get your landfall triggers again, and that's pretty good. Um, I think any green landfall deck is going to want this. It's also green haste, which is pretty strong. Another green card with haste, actually. Yeah, I think you're going to play this pretty frequently. It's a C. Next up is Oran Reef Ooze. For 2 and a green, you get a 2/2 Ooze at rare. When Oran Reef Ooze enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever Oran Reef Ruse attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter on it.
So the Selesnya deck I was talking about before, here you go. This is one of the things that's going to make that deck possible. The last 2 cards plus some of the other support that counters already has in those 2 colors. I think this card's going to be pretty strong in that deck. I also just like that it's an ooze. So
Oozes are fun.
Yeah, I just like that they exist.
Yeah, ooze or lose, baby.
Ooze or lose. So I'm gonna give this card a B tier. I think that it's gonna see some play. I think it's going to be one of the enablers, one of the things that makes the Selesnya counter deck actually be able to work. So yeah.
Yeah. In limited, this is a 3-mana 2/2 that puts a counter on a guy when it first comes down, and that's fine. That'd be pretty good already. But the fact that if you get to untap with this thing and attack with it, and the rest of your team, everybody gets bigger again, it's going to be really, really, really good. And it can put the +1/+1 counter on itself, which is important. That way, it's a 3-mana 3/3 when you play it on turn 3. So that's incredibly important. And all that makes this first pickable, but it's not huge. Man, the fact that if you have +1/+1 counters already and you turn him sideways, he requires too much extra help to be a bomb. But you're still picking him early. B.
Then we have Rabid Bite. For 1 and a green, you get a common sorcery with target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. It's a cleaner version of fighting.
Yeah, it's called biting.
Well, I get that, Greg. That's why it's called Rabid Bite instead of. Anyway, so yeah, I think green already has some insane removal in the set, and I think that budget deck makers might be like, I need some extra removal. This just might do it. I think that this is a D tier card, just because it fits in sometimes. But I mean, you got Ram Through still, you got Hunter's Edge, you got stuff that does this plus. So I think you won't take this you won't put this in your deck all the time, but it might fit a slot sometimes.
In limited, this card's fine. It's some of the best green removal you can get because it doesn't make your creature take damage. You just deal with it, but you still do have to have a guy on board. That doesn't mean it's not good. It's just not premium removal like the other colors get, and that's just something you have to deal with in green. You're still taking it pretty highly, although probably not first picking it. It's a C, but it's a high C.
Yeah, that's just one of the caveats to playing green.
Yeah, like you just removal. Yeah. Next up, you get Reclaim the Waste. For a single green mana, you get a sorcery at common with Kicker for 3. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your library. If the spell was kicked, search for 2 basic land cards instead of 1.
Cultivate is a thing. Cultivate puts one of the lands on the ground, which is just strictly better in every way, shape, and form. You can cast this for 1 mana, but I mean, it can set up your next few turns and will allow you to keep some riskier hands, I guess, because you play your forest and then you can set up your next turn, your turn 2 play. It's not horrible, but I still think that I don't know, the flexibility makes it a little bit better. Just talking about it out loud, I think that this is a D tier card, maybe a C, but I struggle to give it a C just because it puts it into your hand instead of out. So
Yep. In limited, this card's fine. If you're splashing, you're gonna want to play it. Otherwise, you're probably not. It does let you get lands in your hand, so you can trigger landfall later. And it's got the 2 modes, but I really don't see it being super useful outside of, oh my god, I opened 3 bomb rares in different colors. I really need to play a 4-color deck or something. There those situations you'll play it, but it gets cut most of the time. I think this is a D.
next we've got Roiling Rebirth. For 2 and a green, you get an uncommon instant with sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This is an interesting card. You sacrifice one of your lands to then get an additional land. So it is ramp. You're also putting cards in your graveyard, and that is pretty significant with old Uro, being around still. I don't think that this is the best answer to ramp, but it does work. And the fact that you put them out onto the battlefield, you can play this. It's instant, so you can play this on your opponent's end step, and have those lands available to you the next turn. Turn 3, you do nothing. At the end, on your opponent's end step, you sacrifice a land. You got 4 land down. Then you can play a 5th land for turn. So that's a pretty significant jump in mana. But I don't know. This is hard for me to evaluate. I think that this is probably a C tier card. Just because Uro exists. If Uro didn't exist, it would probably be much worse.
In limited, this card's awesome. You're gonna be able to trigger your landfalls twice at instant speed. What? You're going to be able to surprise lethal your opponent with some of these crazy green creatures and red creatures that just pump themselves up. And even the green-white deck to some extent has some landfall stuff going on. Yeah, just it's nuts. It's another one of the cards that lets you fix your colors as well. So I think if you're playing a base green deck, you're going to be able to just splash all of the bombs and stuff. And I think that's going to be really strong as well. This card's great, and honestly, in the lower range of first pickable in some packs, just because of the sheer flexibility it gives you. You want this. I think it's a B. Maybe I'm too high on it, but in limited, I think this is an all-star.
No, I think you have very fair points just because landfall is going to be way more prevalent in limited than it is going to be in standard.
Oh yeah, the landfall deck is going to be strong.
I don't think that they're going to make like a strictly landfall deck in standard. I could be wrong about that, but I just don't think that any of the effects are so strong to be like, you have to play this landfall deck.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Next up, Scale the Heights. For 2 and a green, you get a common sorcery that says put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. You gain 2 life. You may play an additional land this turn. Draw a card.
So I spoke before about the 3 mana sorcery slot.
Yeah,
sorcery slot.
It's a weird cycle, but it's a cycle of cards.
It is. It's another one of those utility cards. It does a lot of things for 3 mana. And I like these cards. I like all of them at this cost, and I think this is a good one. You know, a lot of the time when you play this in most decks, you don't really care about the +1/+1 counter too much. You're playing this to gain the 2 life, to draw a card, and to play an additional land. And I think that that's good enough for 3 mana. I think that that does just enough to justify putting this into some decks. And then sometimes you're putting that +1/+1 counter on your 1-drop mana dork or your 2-drop mana dork. You know what I mean? You're making them be able to defend themselves a little bit better, and that's also good. I think green really, really likes this card a lot, and you know the Selesnya deck likes this card a lot just because you get more +1/+1 counters in your deck without having to sacrifice too much tempo on other things. I think this is a solid B tier card.
In limited, this card is also pretty good. You care about the +1/+1 counter and the drawing a card the most in limited. It's going to make one of your guys big enough to attack in. It's going to replace itself. It's going to give you a little incidental life gain, and sometimes you'll get to play an extra land. Although, sometimes your decks just aren't built for that. So whatever. But it's solid. You're going to want to play at least the first copy of it, and it's going to do you some good work, I think. C.
Yeah, I just really like that they included these cards. I think that I think it was a good move, Wizards.
Yeah, they're really neat.
Next we have Scoot Swarm. For 2 and a green, you get a 1/1 creature insect at rare with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. I may have just taken back the statement that I previously just said about landfall. This little guy's crazy. And I like him. People are gonna make decks around him. Cause I mean, it's just he's good on turn 3.
Yeah,
he's good on turn 6. He's, you know what I mean. He's good. He's good early. He's good late. He's good all the time. I like this card a lot. I'm really trying to look at a downside. I mean, a 3 mana 1/1 is kind of crappy. It's a 3 mana 1/1 that you have to play on turn 4 in order for it to be good. So that's kind of crappy. So, you know, I'll give this a B, but I think this little guy he's gonna sneak some wins in there for some people.
Yeah. A 3 mana 1/1 obviously isn't very good. 3 mana for 2 1/1s, and we start to get a little bit better, although we're still falling a little short. 3 mana for 3 1/1s. Okay. All right, now we're talking. 3 mana for 2 copies of Scoot Swarm, and then
you have 4 Scoot Swarms.
Out of control.
Then you have
can get out of
8 Scoot Swarms. Then you have, you know what I mean? It's just
yeah. I mean, in the landfall deck, this card's obviously going to be amazing. It does need a little bit of support. It doesn't just come down and throw the game in your favor 100%. If your opponent can answer it quick, it's not going to do anything, which is its downfall. If your opponent can answer it quick, it's just 3 mana for 2 1/1s most of the time. But it's still really good. You're going to first pick this, and you're going to just play all the lands and all the roiling regrowths and that sort of thing. It's an easy B.
Survival Rule 782. There are always more Scoot bugs. Zerdy, Goblin, Shortcutter. Yeah. I like this card a lot.
Next up, Skyclave Pickaxe. For a single green mana, you get an equipment at uncommon that says when Skyclave Pickaxe enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. There's a lot of equipment in this set that auto-equip when you cast them. That's really cool. And it also has landfall. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and its equip cost is 2 and a green.
Probably the best equipment in the set, I think, or one of the best equipments in the set.
Yeah, I mean, this card's great.
Yeah, I mean it's standard playable, you know, just because it has a landfall ability on an equipment. That's pretty great. And it's super cheap to play. You play this on turn 2. You play dude turn 1. Play this turn 2. Equip it to a dude. Play your land. Profit. And even late game, it's the equipment cost isn't unreasonable, I guess, for the landfall ability. Yeah, I think this is a solid C.
In limited, this pickaxe is going to ruin your opponent's games. Landfall, turning any of your creatures into a landfall, this creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn is really, really good. That's a huge stat boost every time you drop a forest into play or whatever. The fact that it equips for free is icing on the cake. It's going to be really, really strong. It really helps define the landfall decks. I think you're going to be first picking this, and not even in weak packs. I think this is a pretty easily first pickable card, and I think it's an easy B.
Then we have Swarm Shambler. You get 1 mana for a 0/0 Fungus Beast at rare.
You skipped a couple cards there,
Oh,
friend.
did I? Oh, I did. I'm sorry. I just got so excited. Instead, what I meant to say was Spring Mantle Cleric. For 4 and a green, you get a 2/3 Elf Cleric creature at uncommon with Spring Mantle Cleric enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. Sorry about that. That's the first time that I have done that the entire time we've been reviewing cards. So
we've been on a roll, man.
We have been on a roll. Had to break it one time at some point.
Anyway,
so this is an interesting card. You want to play it in a 5-color deck, right? And give this thing +5/+5. So for 5+1/+1 counters, or in this Lesney deck, a deck that runs that combo +10/+10. Pretty great. So you got a 7/8 for 5 mana in that deck. That's good. Doesn't have any other keywords on it, but I don't really think that it needs it. I think this is your mid-rangey guy that sometimes gets there. Other times it's not as big, but spending 2 mana on this, making it a 4/5 isn't horrible. Spending any more than 2 different color mana on it is where you want to be. I think that this is a solid C tier card.
In limited, this card is going to be pretty good. You're going to be spending 2 colors most of the time, green and whatever else, preferably black, because you're probably in that +1/+1 counter deck. And a 5 mana 4/5 is a reasonable stat line. Any more than that, and you're going to be in really good business. I think most decks are interested in the first copy of this, maybe more if you really get there, or if you're splashing 3, for a 3rd color, it's pretty solid there too. Green is the splash color. I mean, you're going to really be able to do it easily in this format, so I don't see why not. Easy C. Next card, Strength of Solidarity. For a single green mana, you get a common sorcery that reads, choose target creature you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature in your party.
So you have to have a board presence. You have to be, I don't know. For 1 party member, it's fair. For 2 party members, it's somewhere in between being fair and unfair. For 3 and 4 party members, it's kind of broken, I guess. But I don't know. I think this is another C tier card. I think it will see play. I think people will use it in like a mid range party deck. But yeah, C tier.
In limited, this card's pretty fine, especially if you end up in the green black +1/+1 counters matter deck. You're probably going to play this. I think it's going to be pretty easy to get 2 creatures in your party, although it is worth noting like green and black are don't have as many party members. There's some more big monsters in there that you want to be playing a lot of the time. So I think it's actually going to be harder in a green black or a green red deck to get the party, but I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, then this card's going to be way better. If you can easily get it to 3 or 4, it's insane. But the fact that its sorcery speed keeps it from really making big waves. You just make a really big guy before combat, and then you attack with it. And it's like every combat trick. It can get 2 for 1. If your opponent just responds with removal, all of a sudden you've lost 2 cards to their 1 removal spell. All that said, I think it's just going to be hard to make it work. but when it does, it's going to be really good. There'll be situations where you really want to play this, but most of the time it doesn't make the cut. It's a D.
All right, now back to where I was before. Swarm
Shambler. To you.
Yeah, Swarm Shambler for 1 green. You get a 0/0 fungus creature fungus beast at rare with Swarm Shambler enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. And then for 1 and tap Swarm Shambler, you get put a +1/+1 counter on Swarm Shambler. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of text on this card.
There is?
Good, right?
No, not all the time. But I don't know. I mean, it's got a good ability. Makes itself bigger, which is also good. So it's a mana sink. So it starts off as a 1-mana 1/1 and, can steadily get out of control from there, but you are going to be investing into it every turn to do that. And the ability on it is the real reason you're playing it, right? So this is another one of those complex cards where I don't really know what it goes in. I mean, it might go in the Selesnya deck that I've been talking about repeatedly with this color. Just because that's the only one that comes to mind that creates a +1/+1 counter that cares about it very much. But maybe there's a Golgari deck out there with all these cards in it that just does the limited thing better. I think people will probably try that at some point. I don't know. I think this is a C tier card. It might be a C plus, like closer to D, but I'm not 100% positive on it.
In limited, this card's awesome. A 1-mana 1/1 that replaces itself when it gets targeted for the first time. And if you happen to have 1 mana laying around, which is going to happen pretty frequently, you just get it bigger. Just make it bigger. It's cool. It just gets bigger, bigger, bigger until your opponent has to deal with it, and then you still get a 1/1. And it gives all your whole team basically, like, also they are 1/1s when they die because your opponent's going to be killing your stuff. Your opponent has to answer this first before they answer your bigger threats, and if they don't answer this, it becomes a big threat. This card's great. And it does stuff the turn it comes down. I mean, it's not quite a bomb because it's not just crushing your opponent. Oh, shoot, man, maybe it is, but I think it's going to take it too long to get going to be a bomb. But when it does get going, you're going to win the game. Still, pick it highly, pick it first most of the time. High B. Very good. Next card is Tajuru Blightblade. For a single green mana, you get a 1/1 elf rogue at common with Death Touch.
All right. 1 mana 1/1 with Death Touch is pretty good. With the creature types that it has, it makes it okay. It's a D tier card. It's not a showstopper, but in the party deck, you might play this turn 1. It might be the best 1-drop in the party deck. I'm not sure.
In limited, a 1 mana 1/1 with Death Touch is really good. Your opponent can't attack you because you'll just kill their stuff with this guy. A lot of times, this thing's just going to trade up. I mean, almost every time.
Oh, yeah.
There are some red spells that deal with this pretty efficiently, but most of the time, your opponent's just going to have to bite the bullet and trade with it. And that's going to feel real bad for your opponent. For you, it's going to feel great. I don't know that you're first picking this a lot of the times, but it's still really, really, really strong. And you're probably not cutting this. C.
Next, we have Tajuru Paragon. For 1 and a green, you get a 3/2 creature elf at rare. With Tajuru Paragon is also a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. With kicker cost of 3, when Tajuru Paragon enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, reveal the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a card that shares a creature type with it from among them into your hand. Sorry. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
Struggled with that one, but there's a lot of text on this card.
There
that
is.
Makes it good, right?
Yes, actually, in this particular case, it does. Welcome to one of the only reasons that the party deck is going to work if it's a deck that works. They did clarify that this particular card only counts as one of those 4 things, not all 4 of those things.
Yeah. And all shapeshifters in Magic that are also all creature types also only count for 1. You cannot double dip.
Nope,
One
you
creature can't do it all.
So, I mean, if you have if you have more than one of them, they can count for
a cleric,
a different rogue, a different one individually.
Yeah, it's your Swiss Army party member.
I think that this is what's going to make the deck possible. I don't know that the deck is still good. I'm gonna try like a very expensive, like rare and legendary party deck that I think might work. But I mean, and this card's gonna be in there just because it's very flexible. It gets other cards from your deck that you want. I like it. I think that I'm going to rate this probably the highest out of any of the party cards I've done, except for the black one that we did. This is an A tier card. I think that if there's a meta shaping card in the set, this is maybe one of them. I don't know.
Yeah. In limited, 2 mana for a 3/2 is premium stats. That is some real power on turn 2. And the fact that you can kick it in the late game to get a card, basically revealing the top 6, like you're gonna find something that you want. And the blue-green deck specifically really wants to do the kicker thing, and it really wants to do various party member things with rogues and wizards and stuff. And I think this card is amazing in those decks. It's not solo winning you any games or anything, but it's really going to put pressure on early. It's card selection late. It does the party thing exceptionally well. All around, this is fantastic. Pick it early and play it, and you're going to love it. It's a B. Very easy.
Yeah, I mean, Wizard wants this party thing to work, so they had to make the cards that do this kind of thing really good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the only way you push something like this into Constructed. If you want people to commit 4 creatures to the board in order to have effects, they got to be able to do it easily. Next up, Tajuru Snarecaster. For 2 and a green, you get a 1/4 elf rogue at common with reach.
Not good enough. It's an F tier card.
Yeah, short and sweet for Constructed there. For limited, I got a little more to talk about because a 3 mana 1/4 is relevant. It's a rogue, hooray! That's good. And reach does matter. Green oftentimes has a hard time blocking the flying stuff, and this is going to block a lot of the flying stuff in the format. It's still not something you're excited about playing unless you really, really, really need that rogue. It's a D, but it's not an F. You're going to play it sometimes.
And then we have Taunting Arbor Mage. For 2 and a green, you have a 2/3 creature elf wizard at uncommon with kicker cost of 3. When Taunting Arbor Mage enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, all creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. It's a pretty cool card. It's got taunting in the name, so you expect this effect pretty regularly. I like this card. I don't know where you want to play it in Standard. There isn't really any cards that are like, please block me, please, please, please block me, you know. But doing it on Tajari Blightblade that's been buffed up or something like that, it's not horrible. Anything with Death Touch, you know, you want to kill something. This is one of the ways to do it. So it's kind of like removal, kind of like, you know. But I don't know. I think this is a C tier card. I don't think it's going to do anything crazy, but it's not horrible.
In limited, this is a 3 mana 2/3 on turn 3, and later it's a card that lets you sneak in lethal. This makes all creatures block your smallest guy, and then all your big guys just beat the shit out of them. It's awesome. It's really good to have these creatures that in the early game they come down and are a reasonable body, and then in the late game they can come down and they can really put your opponent in a bind. Especially if you've managed to fill a board up and then just attack, you're going to be in a really good place with this. And I think you're going to want to play this most of the time. It's almost first pickable because, but I think you do have to be in a specific deck to want to first pick this. So I'm just going to give it a C, but you're usually not cutting this. Next up, Territorial Scythe Cat. For 2 and a green, you get a 2/1 cat at common with trample and landfall. Put a +1/+1 counter on Territorial Scythe Cat.
Even in standard, this card's not bad. I still think this is a D tier card. Just because it takes a while for it to get going and for it to actually pay off. I mean, you get 1+1/+1 counter on it. It's pretty reasonable. You get any more than that, and it's starting to look pretty good. If this stays on the board through most of your mid game, it's probably going to win you the game, just because of how big it is. But it probably won't last that long in standard. It'll probably just get removed the turn you play it most of the time, or a couple turns after that. I think this is a D tier card. I wish it was better, but it's really slow.
In limited, this is going to be great. There are a number of creatures that do the landfall make this guy get bigger permanently ability, and all of those creatures are quite good. And this one just straight up has trample, just straight up. So in the early game, it is kind of a small body. A 3-mana 2/1 doesn't do much. You really need at least one landfall trigger before this thing starts to get where it needs to go. But if you manage to have this stay alive for a few turns, which it's limited, it's going to happen sometimes. It's going to happen frequently even. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger until it eventually just kills your opponent. You're going to like it. I think as long as you're a landfall deck, you're not going to cut this card. It's worth noting it's just a cat, so it doesn't fill any party members' roles. So I think it puts it firmly in the green-red archetype or the green-black archetype, which I think are the ones that aren't going to be party member focused all that much. But in both of those archetypes, it's insane. And in the other ones, it's still pretty good. Easy C.
If that thing existed in real life, I would just be terrified to leave my house. Like, it's got scythes on
real life, we would have probably hunted it to extinction because of how dangerous it is. Or it would be the dominant species, and we'd all be dead from,
It has scythes on its arms. Just
that's
legs.
actually
Look.
Not very good.
But it's
design.
Just
some blades sticking out of its legs.
But it's just really cool. Useful. I mean, why not? Cut. You're gonna
cut yourself with that all the time.
Nah. You're a scythe cat. You're not cutting yourself with it.
Just arm blade anything you want, but
you're not gonna hurt yourself. It's my turn, right?
Oh, you didn't see me do the arm blade gestures, but I was over here like jacking stuff up with my fake arm blade.
Shing, shing, shing. It's my turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turn timber.
Ascetic, Josiah.
Ascetic.
What is ascetic?
Ascetic.
Ascetic.
Ascetic. Turn timber ascetic for 4 and a green. You get a 5/4 giant cleric creature at common. With when turn timber ascetic enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life.
That's a huge cleric.
That's a great I mean, man, you gotta feel protected with a giant cleric around, especially one that's literally carrying a tree. I unfortunately, as cool as I think that this, like the art of this card and the flavor of this card is, I don't think this card is going to see any play in any way, shape, or form. So it's an F tier card, I guess, but I do still like it.
It's got a flipping blindfold on.
It's a great. I mean,
I just swing my tree.
Like I said, it's a great.
Yeah,
it's great, but
in limited to this card's fine. I mean, it's not insane. It's a reasonable curve topper if you don't have any of the other big stuff. In white, there's a 5-mana 3/4 flying angel that does this same effect, and that's just way better, even though it has 2 less power. So I mean, it's okay. You're gonna cut it a lot of the time, but because it gains you 3 life, there are gonna be some decks that you're gonna want this sometimes. So it's not quite an F, but it's pretty close to it. D. Next up, Vastwood Surge. For 3 and a green, you get an uncommon sorcery with Kicker for 4. It says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, Then shuffle your library. If this spell was kicked, put 2+1/+1 counters on each creature you control.
This is a win more card that searches you land, or it's a searching land card. It's a land. It's a card that searches you land, and then you win more. For 8 mana, this thing better do a lot. Because again, I have to directly compare it to whatever else is at the 8 mana slot, and right now you're seeing inscriptions at 8 mana or 7 mana, and you're seeing Ugin at 8 mana, or you're being able to play 2 or 3 different things from your hand for the same amount of cost. So this thing, compared directly to all of those choices, if you don't have a wide board already, if you got 2 creatures on, it's not really worth kicking. Got 3 creatures, maybe. If this was instant, it would be much better. But most things are better when they're instant speed. So that it goes without saying, I guess. I think it's just too darn expensive to do the whole thing. I mean, if the kicker effect was more than just the +1/+1 counters, I mean, in this Lesnie deck, paying 8 mana to put 4 +1/+1 counters on all your dudes, that's insane. That's great. You do that all the time. But in every other deck, in every other situation, I don't know that you want to kick this card. And searching your library for up to 2 basic lands and putting them on the battlefield tapped is pretty good for 4 mana. So, I don't know. I'm going to evaluate it at a C, a low-end C, just because it gets both the lands onto the battlefield. So,
yeah. In limited, green almost always has a card that for 4 mana puts 2 lands onto the board tapped. And they're usually okay. In this set, they're going to be much better because this gives you double landfall triggers, and that's really, really, really good. The fact that in the late game you can just sometimes buff your whole team is just extra stuff, but that is really good extra stuff. It's expensive, so it's not going to come up too often, and most of the time you're just paying 4 for 2 landfall triggers, but that's probably worth it a lot of the times. In most formats, this card's actually a D or even an F because you just don't need to do it unless you're splashing a lot. In this format, I think it's going to be better because you're going to play this in decks where you don't even need the splash. And in green, you're going to be able to splash all the bombs. You're gonna play green, and then like pack 3, you're going to open like a bomb blue card. And you're just going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to splash blue. It's fine, easy. I think this is going to be a C in this format, where a lot of these cards kind of fall a little bit shorter.
It's just a very clunky card, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it searches you land.
Oh yeah, in limited it's way different, but in standard, I think I definitely agree with you. It's too clunky, it's too slow.
It's just too clunky.
It's too expensive for what it does.
It's like kind of confusing because I'm paying 8 mana to buff my team. I kind of want it to be better than this, but at the same time, I'm getting 2 lands. So it's like, well, how do I have to value each?
If you've already got 8 mana, why are you getting 2 lands?
Exactly. Why do I need 2 lands? Like, it's like, well, I don't know.
You don't need them is the answer.
Most of the time, you don't.
Of crabs.
There you go. My turn. Yeah, it's a veteran adventurer. For 5 and a green, you get a 5/5 human creature at uncommon with veteran adventurers, also a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party, and it has vigilance.
A lot of text on this card.
You know, and then this is another case where more text is better. So you got a 6 mana 5/5. Okay. You know, not the best, not the worst. Doesn't really have a super relevant creature tagline. And then you're like, oh, it's also a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. Okay, that makes it better. And now you can cheat it out sometimes for 2 mana. And then it has vigilance. So it gets better the further down the card you go. And I think this is another one of those cards that's going to be played in the party deck. In like a mid-range party deck, you want this 5/5 around. It fills whatever slot you need. You don't necessarily have to play any wizards in your deck except for 4 of these dudes. And that makes it pretty good, or any rogues or whatever else you don't want to run.
Yeah, you've also got the little 2 mana dude too.
Yeah, so you got 2 cards. You can make a warrior deck in green and then play 8 of those, 4 of this guy and 4 of the other guy, and then you got your full party most of the time. Just from, you'd have to play warrior and cleric or warrior and rogue, whatever. You can play 2 of them, and then these guys are the other 2, right? So it's pretty great. I think this is a B tier card, B plus probably. I think that it's going to make it into a lot of decks.
In limited, a 6 mana 5/5 with vigilance is okay. Um, it it's a little. It would be a little pricey for what it does, and this card gets around that by making it cheaper. A lot of the time, I think you're going to be able to cast this for 4. For 5, it's pretty good. For 5, it's an easy C. 5 mana 5/5 vigilance. You're playing that. It's a great top end. A 4 mana 5/5 with vigilance, and we're really starting to talk. I think by turn 4, you could reasonably have 2 different classes out on the board.
Especially in green. Especially in green.
Well, in limited, it's going to be harder because that rare guy is that you're not going to see him very often. But you still get 3 of the 4 party classes in green. So I think it's not going to be hard to do this, especially if you pair this with another color that has a multitude of the classes as well. You're going to really be able to make this a 4 mana 5/5 with vigilance a lot, and then it's really good. It might even be first pickable. B, I think this is good. I think it's a B. Last but not least, or maybe least, I don't know. We need to review it. Vine Gecko. For 1 and a green, you get a 2/2 elemental lizard creature at uncommon. It says the first kicked spell you cast each turn costs 1 less, and whenever you cast a kicked spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vine Gecko.
This is a 4 of in every single kicker deck. In standard, it's easy. I mean, it's an easy 4 of, and it's not legendary, so you can play all 4 of them if you want to, all out at the same time, and now your kicker spells cost 4 less to cast, and now all your kicker spells are way better.
Well, only the first one you cast.
You're right, the first, but still, that's all of them.
You're probably only casting 1 a turn anyway.
Yeah, kind of I was gonna say, so you're just tempoing it out at that point. You're playing 1 of those kicker spells a turn, and that makes Vastwood Surge much better. Vastwood Surge doesn't suck if you're kicking it if you're playing it.
Still sucks.
Okay, I'm just saying it doesn't suck as much. So this makes
it doesn't suck as much. That's true. None of them suck as much.
The kicker cards are suddenly a little bit better in standard. I think this is a solid B, maybe like a B plus to your card, just because it's going in a deck. It's got a home already.
Oh yeah. In limited, this is a great enabler for the blue-green kicker for the same reasons. Generally speaking, the kicker costs are a little expensive. This helps you get around that. And it also grows you a creature every time you kick your spells. I mean, whatever. This is great. It's first pickable, especially if you're already in that deck. Easy B. You're never cutting this.
Well, that does it for green. Next up, we have all of the Model lands, all of the lands, all of the artifacts, and the multicolored cards. So you get a wide variety in the next one. It's just the rest of the cards, all in one set.
All of the rest of them.
But yeah, thank you for Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you did, hopefully you enjoyed our reviews.
Let us know if you think we got anything wrong, and let us know what you agree with, and let us know how much you're looking forward to Zendikar Rising, because I'm ready.
Yeah, man, I'm so ready, man. 72 packs, here we come, boys. It's gonna happen. But give us a like, comment, and share it. If you haven't subscribed and you want to see more content like this, getting some more subscribers would definitely make us more incentivized to make more videos.
We love Magic, and we're gonna play and make Magic stuff.
And also dedicate more time to the videos that we have. We both work full-time jobs, so it's really, really hard for us to be able to sit down for several hours and edit a video and have it still be relevant in a time frame. Because we can edit a video, it just might take 2 weeks sometimes, and by that point, nobody cares about the video anymore.
Exactly.
So
such is life.
It is life. So let us know what you think, and we'll take it from there. Until next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.